Hello, everybody. Dr. Rick Wallace dropping in on you. Hope everybody is having an unbelievable start to your week, no matter where you're at, no matter what you're doing. If you're still breathing, you are still in the fight. Never, ever give up. Never, ever quit. Don't get caught up in all of the things that are going on in your life that aren't producing the results you want. Get focused on what you can do to change it. And I guarantee you that no matter where you're at, no matter what you're going through, no matter how things are, you can change it. On that note, look, we're going to move into what I want to talk to you about. First and foremost, I'm going to remind everybody who's watching to remember that we are in the middle of a fundraiser. Obviously, there's a targeted fundraiser for Black Men Lead, the Rite of Passage initiative that is focused on properly socializing young Black males into manhood, but there's also a general fundraiser. You'll find all of that information on how you can support the work that we do in the description box of the video that you're watching. If you are unfamiliar with who we are, me as an individual and the Odyssey Project as an organization, there is a link to the organization's official website also in the description box. There you will find an unbelievable amount of information on the work we've done over the decades, the work we are currently doing, articles, position papers, research, programs, and services offered and everything. And you can really find out what we do and why we do it and so much more. So there you have it. Look, anybody who has followed me for any stretch of time knows that I am extremely passionate about the Black family. I am extremely passionate about Black love. I am extremely concerned about the division within the ranks of the Black community, especially as it pertains to Black men and Black women. That is not by accident. That has been socially engineered, and we, because of our own experiences and because of the enemy within, have become extremely vulnerable to the compulsions and pushes of media influences, political and social influences, and we have tumbled. I want to talk about the Black family, but I want to talk about it from two different perspectives simultaneously. So I need to forewarn you, while I'm going to be talking about things in which can be easily classified as victimization of our people, victimization of our communities, victimizations of our families and our homes, we must also approach it from a point of view that we cannot function as victims and ever in any way secure victory, secure empowerment, secure change. So we must understand that there have been people who have been moving against us and have in many ways had a massive impact on negative results in our community, but we cannot use that as an excuse not to rise. We cannot use that as an excuse not to invest ourselves in change. We cannot use that as an excuse not to go out and do what's necessary to prepare, empower, and protect our youth as the representation of what's possible for us in the future. We cannot do that. So we're going to have to be able to talk about what's been done to us, but we must talk about it within the confines of the mindset that we can create change. I have been very, very vocal about my belief that the family is the bedrock of Black empowerment, that the family is the foundation of Black empowerment, that the family is, without a shadow of a doubt, the institution through which the values, interests, and principles that represent the potential for Black empowerment and true liberation, it emerges and it presents itself and it is sustained out of the family. We can't wait until people become adults to start trying to teach many of the principles that are at the core of empowerment. Trying to teach someone who is operating from a mindset of poverty, a mindset of lack, a mindset of being invested in the system, it's hard to teach them about Black group economics when they're in their 20s and their 30s after living in that mindset. So where do you teach it to them? You teach it to them in the home. You inculcate it into their young minds as they are growing up. You make it a part of their natural psychology and part of their natural being. And you do that at early ages. That's why socialization is so important in the Black community. That's why Black men lead is essential. But let me explain something to you. If I understand this, if I've done the research and I understand the importance of the Black family, how it's played out, uh, reaching all the way back into slavery, where we weren't allowed to actually marry, but we did anyway, and how that played a role in us even surviving such a vicious 246-year event. We have to understand, if I understand that, don't you think that they, with over 1,300 think tanks on how to maintain their power, understand that the family is the core, especially in the Black community? We are by nature relational at a higher level than most people are naturally relational. We really depend on it. And even in dysfunctional situations, the relationships are important. That's why it's hard to get two Black men who don't like each other to work together, where white men do it all the time. Why? They're not as relational. They don't put as much investment in the connectivity between one another. It's, hey, this is what we do, we get the job done. It's not like that with us. And so what we must understand is they know that. They understand that the family is literally the uh, the power source. The family is the foundation of what is to be uh, our future, and they know it, and to they've been working to in many ways disrupt, disintegrate, destroy, minimize, marginalize, mitigate, whatever you want to say, the force of the Black family. And it's happened over decades. And a lot of people talk about, well, when we came over here, that disrupted the family. Slavery. No, slavery didn't do it. We get the whole jump in the broom thing from slavery, even though in the U.S., chattel slavery didn't present the same rights as slavery in other places, like in South America, where slaves actually had rights to be married, be connected, and those rights were actually respected. That didn't happen here. We didn't have that. And yes, families were constantly and perpetually separated, dislodged, and sold off. That was a part of the manner in which they controlled. They did not want men bonding with their progeny. They did not want men bonding with their women, because they found out that if we bonded, we would die to protect what we had bonded with. So they created a system of consistently keeping men separated from what they were creating. Now, the natural urging of a man is to be a sustainer and source of what he creates. That's the natural push. So you have to psychologically and sociologically and systematically interrupt that. If you're going to ever weaken the core of a people, you have to start with attacking and weakening the resolve of the man, because if the man is willing to die to protect, you're going to always have a problem. And so we go through that. But even in slavery, even in Reconstruction, even in Jim Crow, the Black family was pretty solid. See, all the way up to 1960, 75% of young Black children were born into two-parent households. So despite the dysfunction going on in those houses, because we're not going to pretend that those families and those houses were protected. It was actually the enemy within that made the attack from the outside possible. But we're going to get to that in a minute. What I want to try to do is point to you so that you can understand the machinations and mechanisms and systems at play that have worked systematically to destroy the Black family, understanding the power. And my whole point in all of this is going to be to show you just how important it is to create young Black males and young Black females that understand the importance of power and in the family and the connectivity in the family. There is a push to get, we've gone from 75% plus of Black children being born in two-parent households to the complete opposite of 73 to 75% born in the single-parent households. And there's still a push to pull those men out of the house. Now, there is some encouraging news that is slightly changing, maybe a 1% shift over the last couple of years. But what we need is we need to restore the Black family nucleus, because it's in the Black family nucleus that the values, the interests, and the principles that are conducive to power are taught to our children in the family environment. And there is a coming together of both feminine and masculine energy in the way that those values, interests, and principles are inculcated into the mind, psyches, and souls of these children. It takes both parents. Now, we'll get into that either later at another time, but I need you to understand that it requires both parents. The idea that we can do it without one another is something that's being constantly pushed as a narrative now, that as long as you got the money, you can be a great parent. And that's not true. As long as you got the resources, you can be a great parent. No, there's a deeper responsibility to parenting than just buying clothes, than just feeding, than just putting shelter. There is a nurturing and a teaching and a protecting. There's supposed to be something surrounding these kids that provide both loving and nurturing, discipline and protection, and security that allows them to develop into who they're supposed to become. They should know who they are before they're ever exposed to a world that's trying to redefine them. That's a problem that we consistently face because we are not providing the insulation and the security that's necessary for our children. We're too busy caught up in who we are, what we can do, all the other things, and we're not doing what's necessary to totally protect our children. So here's what happens. How did we get from 1960, where it had been 75%? Well, let's go back to a question that J. Edgar Hoover, who at the time was the J. Edgar Hoover, who at the time was the director of the FBI, and he was asked what was the greatest threat to American security, and his response was Black unity. There was this knowledge and understanding that the coming together and the collectivity and natural pulling together of people of color, specifically Blacks, was a power. It was a threat to national security. This is J. Edgar Hoover. Now, let's look at what happens. In 1965, a sociologist who was in the political sphere and was an advisor to Lyndon B. Johnson by the name of Daniel Patrick Moynihan wrote a report called The Negro Family, A Case for National Action. And it was eventually affectionately became known as the Moynihan Report. In the Moynihan Report, there are a couple of things that come out. Number one, that Moynihan pointed out was the first thing that we're going to have to acknowledge is that our Black citizens are a unique population in that they have been negatively impacted by 246 years of chattel slavery. And we must be aware of the impact of that experience in understanding their dilemma. Another thing he pointed out is that social programs that fund single parenting and entice single parenting and provide financial stability for the woman in the absence of the man would be diametrically opposed to the true nature of what should be done. His suggestion was, instead of investing in social programs to support women and children, Black women and children, invest in creating jobs, give Black men jobs that they can use to pay for their family. We're talking about the Black men who were unemployed. We're not talking about the Black men in the community that I'm about to talk to who were employed and were taking care of their families. We're talking about the ones who weren't employed and families who were struggling with poverty. Okay, because this is going to become important. He again talks about the need to empower the man in order to sustain the community. He understood it. He was a sociologist before he was a sociologist before he was a politician, and he used what he understood about sociology to write this report. Here we go. Instead of listening, this is what we did. And now keep in mind, this is a Democrat administration. So this isn't the Republicans, and I'm not a champion for the Republicans, but I'm pointing out something here. We love to sit up and see things without seeing the truth of the matter, and we believe something because of the illusion presented and not understanding that we need to check the results. The results is understanding, based on this report, what would happen. They deindustrialized the inner city. Why is the inner city? Why is that important? Because up until the 60s, a Black man could, even without a high school diploma, but definitely without a college degree, go out, get work in the warehouses and factories and plants within the city, make a good enough living, get benefits, great retirement, and make a wage that allowed him to support his family. Now, this was a skilled thing, whether it was manufacturing plants in the Midwest, whether it was auto plants in the northern Midwest in Michigan, and all over. There was somewhere for the Black man to work in the inner city that he could use his skill set. He could be a welder. He could be a plumber. He could be an electrician. He could be a mechanic. There were so many different things that he could be that didn't require him to have a college education, but could make a very good living and support his family. But when they deindustrialized, they pulled that out of the community. They didn't just stop there. This is in the late 60s. This is somewhere right around after the assassination of Dr. King. And now what you have to understand is that we now know from the trial in 1999 that the US government was directly responsible for the assassination of Dr. Martin Luther King. This wasn't just some wayward outside group. This was a specific plan set in motion by the US government to eliminate Dr. King. And why did they eliminate Dr. King? Because at one point they were able to use Dr. King as a buffer between disenfranchised Blacks and the government by placating them with what they thought were wins, integration. They even gave us that. That was the worst thing that could ever happen. Why? Because we sacrificed our autonomy in order to be accepted into a community where we didn't own anything. We gave up what we owned, our theaters, our buses, our cabs, all the things that we owned, we gave it up. We had it. We were strong and we were a threat because we were unified. Here's the problem. At the same time that we are emasculating the Black man by deindustrializing, we are at the same time understanding the need to pull him out of the house altogether. So, and I'm talking about them, they understand it. So what happens? They deindustrialize the city. They deindustrialize school programs starting in the 70s, and they've been doing it ever since. I think for the most part, by the time you got through the mid 80s, auto mechanics, wood shop, all that stuff pulled out of most inner city schools. Why? Because you could graduate from school with a skill to earn a living that allowed you to take care of a family. You could literally emerge from school 18, 19 years old, making enough money to get out and take care of yourself. And if you decided to take on a family, you could. And then what did they do? They started to push college education as the means for which to escape poverty. Now, you go from a skilled labor. Let me tell you something. If these are skilled, if you can do something with them, and that's something my grandfather taught. There were so many things my grandfather could do. It would blow your mind. He taught me how to work on a car. Right now, still, even though I don't have to change my own brakes, change the brakes for my daughter's cars and everything else. I can change brakes. I can change alternator. I can pull a head off. I can do a valve job. I can change starters. Almost anything that you can talk about on that car, I can do it because he could do it. And he taught me how to do it. Now, there are a lot of things now that are computerized that need to be plugged in and running checks and all that. You know, if you turn me loose with it long enough, I'm going to figure it out. But the mechanical parts of it that you have access to, I can still do because I was taught. I was taught carpentry. I was taught how to work with my hands. I was out making money as an 11-year-old cutting grass. You learned how to work. It was something you did. You were taught how to work, but they said, okay, this is how you're going to earn a living. This is how you need to go out and get an education. Here's the problem. If you are a plumber, you're going to be able to find work. There are plenty of plumbers who make six figures. There are plenty of electricians who make six figures. There are plenty of mechanics who make six figures. I learned that while actually in college, my freshman year, I worked during the summer at a dealership. Matter of fact, it was the largest Oldsmobile dealership in the country at the time. And I worked there, and I come to find out that the people, those mechanics, looking like most of them looking like a bunch of rednecks, um, not very educated or articulate. They were flagging mad crazy hours, because that's what mechanics do. They flag time. They don't get paid by how many hours they're on the clock. They flag time. Everything that they do on a car has a time that you flag based on this thing. So they're flagging time. It might not take them 2.5 hours to do it. It might take them an hour, but they get to flag 2.5 hours. So they're flagging all this time, and they're getting paid $35, $45 an hour, and they're flagging this time. They're making a killing. And I'm going, and this is in the 80s. So, and imagine what it is now. But we're not encouraging our kids to go out and do it. We're encouraging our kids to go out and get an education, because it's something that was held from us for so long. We see the value, and there's nothing wrong with it. I am an institutionally educated person, but there's so much more to me outside of that, that sustained me and carried me outside of the diploma. Because here's what happens: you go get this diploma or this degree, and you hang it on the wall. It doesn't guarantee that you're going to work. It doesn't guarantee that you're going to earn enough money to make a living. Because I'm going to tell you something. If you go back to our parents and our grandparents from the 60s back, while they may not make as much money, the value of the dollar that they made carried more. So they lived better lives than we do now, generally speaking. Why? Because they had a skill that paid. And a lot of times, this thing that we constantly talk about being able to have the man that can pay all the bills. Back then, the man was paying all the bills because he could. But then they slowly introduced this thing. But what happens is now you got people out there with degrees, and they have more debt than they're able to work and pay off. You got people 15 to 20 years from their graduation date in college, still with debt from their student loans. So what they did is they got you caught up in a game where you stopped pursuing something that you could control. Because here's another thing: at the end of the day, we're who we have. What made Tulsa, Black Wall Street, and Slocum, and Rosewood, and Wilmington, and East St. Louis, and certain parts of Chicago, what made them so successful is they understood how to support one another, how to lean in. And when others wouldn't buy from you, you had your community. And that's what sustains all other communities. There's a level of self-support, self-sufficiency, self-engagement, self-investment in the community that there's always, if I got something that my community needs, then I'm going to eat. At the very least, I'm going to eat. If I can give my community will come to. And we have a different thing. Most of the things that you can do and learn on a degree level are not things that most Black people are going to want to pay you for. So you're still dependent upon a system that, if it can't exploit you, will not empower you. So again, here we are, but we're still in the 70s now, and we're starting to see Black men come out of the homes. And I'm not going to get into that, because here's the problem. Because we hadn't dealt with the incest, because we hadn't dealt with the abuse, because we hadn't dealt with the cheating and the fathers and husbands with multiple families, we hadn't dealt with the pain and the issues of many women who were coming in and broken. That there was so much pain in the home that when the opportunity to do something without one another presented itself, especially in many instances where women had gone through so much of that, having to sit up and swallow what was going on in the home in so many different ways. And this isn't pointing the blame on any one person, because there's enough to go around, trust me. And if you know me and you follow me, I don't play sides. There's enough to go around. But what I'm talking about is, in this particular instance, they targeted the emotion of the woman because they knew her pain. And we don't have to argue it whether or not she had pain, because we can go back and Brother Malcolm told us before 1965, before the case, before Monahan wrote the Negro Family, a Case for National Action. Brother Malcolm told us that the Black woman was the most unprotected. He told us that she was the most uncovered. And right now, she suffers from depression more than any other woman in the country. And there's a reason for it. We can sit up and we can do all the finger pointing we want, but we're going to have to deal with the realities. And I'm not saying that it's easy for Black men. I'm saying that we have the biggest target on our backs. And what happens is we've become so consumed with what's going on with us that we can't hear what the other person is saying. I need you to know my pain, so I'm not trying to hear you talk about yours, because now I've become convinced that when you talk about your pain, you're not acknowledging mine. I can't seem to wrap my head around the fact that maybe both of us are hurt, that maybe both of us are disappointed, that maybe both of us went through childhoods that did not produce the type of environment that we needed to rise to the occasion. Maybe both of us have struggled. So now we're pointing the finger at one another. And I'm not talking about any individual. I'm talking about as a collective. We're pointing the finger at each other. I need you to see my pain, and I need you to see my pain. My pain is because of you. You did this to me. You left me with children to raise. You left me to try to figure this out. You made me get into a position I wasn't built for. You brought out a level of masculinity in me that I'm not designed to carry. And now it's made me abrasive. Now it's made me aggressive. Now it's made me difficult to understand and deal with. And the black man is saying, you didn't protect me when I was a child. You didn't let this happen. You ran off this, or you did this. And the black man is saying that you have no respect for me and you have no need for me. You keep telling me you don't need me. And my drive tells me, my inner drive tells me that I need to be respected and needed before I need to be loved. So I can't understand this distance and vitriol and anger and frustration that's coming from you. And she's hurting and he's upset and angry, and all of this stuff is coming out. It's everybody's fault except our own. And so nobody's looking within to fix self. Let me tell you, on an individual level and on a collective level, it's got to start within. So when I'm looking at what's going on in my life and whatever may be going on in any part of my life, the first thing I have to sit up and say is, it doesn't matter what someone else did. What am I going to do to be better? Because I can't change what has happened. I can only impact what is coming. And so what am I going to do? I'm going to sit up and I'm going to complain. Am I going to point fingers? Am I going to place blame? Or am I going to allow my pain, my frustration, my disappointments to make me bitter? Or am I going to allow them to make me better? But what they did is they came in and they took the means. But see, what we didn't realize is we put ourselves in that position because we were still dependent upon them to provide what we needed to do what we needed to do for our families. We are going to have to teach young black males the power of self-sufficiency, the power of independence, the power to create something. And we have now tools and technology that open up the world to us, that there are things that I do as a business person when nobody knows who I am. So racism doesn't come apart in it. Can I provide the services that they need? Can my company produce what they want? They never see me. They never see my name. And then there's obviously things that have my name on it, the things that I love and I'm passionate about, that the breadth of what I do have my name on it. But I provide my services at such a level that I have people from almost every race interested in what I do because I'm good at it. But I can tell you that the people who benefit the less from it are from my people. Why? Because those are things that our people have not been conditioned to understand and appreciate. Mental health services, understanding the mind and having somebody work with you with empowering your mind. We don't understand that. We see that as a weakness. We see that as something we don't want to accept and claim. So we're not putting in the work. We're not getting it done. But I keep pushing, I keep offering, I keep making exceptions. I keep doing whatever I can to get as many of my people into the fold so they can experience it, so they can go out and say, man, this stuff works. And so now people are starting to give value to things that are benefiting others while we're not benefiting from it and putting us at a disadvantage. There are so many different things that are happening. But what I can tell you is, as long as we're pointing the finger at one another, as long as we're bringing our hurts and our pains from our childhood, as long as we're not sitting down and looking within ourselves and saying, you know what, just by me changing me, things change, and start looking at things from an interior perspective, that forgiveness does not mean that a person didn't do something. It simply means I'm not finna drag it around anymore. I don't have to carry it. It's not my baggage. I got enough to deal with trying to make sure I'm good to be pagging around some hurt about something that happened. It happened. What am I going to do about it? I'm going to allow the pain to prune me. I'm going to allow it to perfect me. I'm going to allow it to do a lot of things. And ultimately, I'm going to allow it to purify me to a level that I can be the best that I can be to my people. And then I'm going to show my people how to do the same thing. But the first thing that we've got to grasp is that we have been robbed in an area that we cannot afford to lose ground in. And we've given up so much already, and that's the family. Let me tell you something. If you study any other people, watch the value that they give the family outside of Western culture. Western culture has totally thrown the middle finger to marriage. The Western culture has no value for marriage. Watch other groups. Now, there are certain groups within Western culture that have a very high, and it depends on where they come from, but you're going to find that Jews, Arabs, Asians, those top performers have a very high value for marriage. Doesn't mean they're perfect, doesn't mean that there isn't things going on, but they have a value for marriage. In many of those cultures, and especially if you start to look eastward, where those cultures originated and moved to the US and were held tightly within the enclaves of those communities. That's why you see Asians living around a bunch of Asians. In Houston, there's an entire multi-square miles of an Asian enclave where they operate, where the signs in city of Houston are in their Asian dialect, where they operate now. They're protecting a heritage. They understand that the more they move outside of that, the more they're influenced by the outside culture. And so they sit up and they will literally take their children. If their children get too away from the culture, they'll ship them back home for a while. That's how they're protecting this culture. But what I found is, in doing my research for the 2 books that I did on marriage, their value on marriage, it's many of those cultures that one of the worst things you can do is get a divorce. It puts shame on the family. Now, this isn't me suggesting that you stay in an abusive relationship. This isn't me suggesting that you sit up and let somebody misuse you, mistreat you, mishandle you, or anything, or devalue you. What I am speaking to is how many people are walking away from workable situations in the family. That's the thing that we've got to start to value, because that's the thing they're capitalizing on. Where other people in this country that are doing the same thing, they're in a different socioeconomic position. They're in a position of power already. So what happens with them? They also have more numbers. So the number of people who do it doesn't have the same impact on the overall collective. We can't have 75% of our homes with one person in it trying to pull the weight. There's also, beyond that initial stage of rearing children, there's also parenting adults from that same position of unity. Because when we sit up and we give up on ourselves in our marriage, we are training our children to do the same thing. And what do? We put them in the same situation of making it harder on themselves than it has to be, trying to pull something on their own, because that's what you do. No, that's not what you do. That's what they want you to do. That's happening on a multiple. It's not just happening from white supremacy's perspective. It's happening from a darker evil side of things. There's a darker evil side that loves destruction. And that destruction is pulling men out of homes. Some of them are coming out chasing things that they think are there. Some are being pushed out. But whatever it is, we need men back in the homes. We need unity. We need love. We need a desire to hold things together. We need to be teaching the next generation the importance of this institution. We need to be understanding why they've gone so hard at destroying it. Well, number one is, I looked into some years ago 2 murders that people talk about but rarely go into great detail about. And one of them isn't considered a murder officially, but if you look at the long-standing investigation and revisiting of the investigation, you come to find out it was definitely a murder. The first one we definitely know was a murder. That was Sam Cooke. The second one is Jimi Hendrix. Well, when you study them both, you find that they both had committed to significantly funding the Black movement. Hendrix supposedly died of an overdose, but when you look at it, the stories have changed over the years. The investigations into it have produced that a lot of the things that came out in the initial story were not true. We know that for a fact. And that he met an untimely demise in the way a bunch of our other brothers have, who have decided since then. There are a bunch of questionable deaths to the voices who speak truth, to the voices who are unapologetically Black, who are unapologetically committed to giving our people the platform they need to rise to become what it is they desire to be. We have a responsibility to understand what's happening to us. One of the greatest failures that we consistently suffer from is not knowing how things work, how things are being used against us, and how to overcome it, how to counter it, how to put ourselves in a position of power. We are so caught up in the superficial. We're so caught up in how we appear. We're so caught up in being accepted. We're so caught up in proving we've arrived. We're so caught up in trying to grab a piece of the American pie that we are losing ourselves. And in losing ourselves, we are losing the ability and the capacity to impact the future of our children and our grandchildren and our great grandchildren. We are robbing them of something precious, and we don't even see it because we've been distracted, and we've been veiled for so long that we are buying into something that does not serve us. We are literally investing into something that cannot bring a return. We are going to have to discover who we are. We are going, and Ethylene, absolutely, there are definitely more chasing the illusion than there are conscious people. The thing is, it's a slow process. I can tell you, your question is, matter of fact, I think I just put it up here so people can read it. The question is, how do we come together, the conscious community? That's the thing that I think that we're at now. It's not one person. We know that they killed Medgar, that they killed Malcolm, that they killed Martin, that they ostracized and destroyed um, uh, Marcus Garvey. Now the crazy thing is, they did that because those people had the ability to unify. Those people had the ability to unify. And as long as Martin was unifying, talking about integration was a problem. It was when Martin said, I believe I've integrated my people into a burning building. And it was when Martin said in the last year and a half, to the gas 18 months of his life on end, where he was talking about going and demanding a check, he was starting to move towards reparation versus integration, that they decided he was a problem because he had a following that they had actually, supported him building, because the more people who were following his peaceful protests and his peaceful push, the less we had to worry about the rise of a Black people who were going to demand what they deserved. But now Martin is demanding it, and he had to be silenced. Well, in silencing Martin, they realized that uh, the Black family was the Black power base. Because if you start to look at Malcolm, if you start to look at Marcus, you start to look at a bunch of the other movements that were coming up, it was the Black family with the money that was being made in the Black community that was supporting these movements. And so what happens? We need to stop this. We need to kill the Black power base. So they took the Black man out of the house. They took the Black man out of the house. And yes, we participated in it. There's enough culpability to go around. Yes, we participated in it. But here's what happens. Okay, now that the more the Black man becomes irrelevant in the home, the more that the female is being the head of the household, the more that she's carrying the load. Whether she's carrying the load via government support, or whether she's one that has been invited into the arena, you got to understand that the Black community is the only place that the Black woman is pretty much equal footing and earning with her male counterpart. All other races, the male significantly out earns the female. That's why it kills me when I see Black sisters getting involved in this feminism thing about Black equality. You guys are actually right there with us. We're at 44, a median earning income of 44,000. You're at 42. So That's not by accident. What that creates is less of a need financially for her to lean into a man. So then if we don't have a true understanding of what manhood is, and all we see is whether or not you can help me financially, and that's the only thing we can see, when you can't do that, you become irrelevant. And then what happens after enough black men become irrelevant? The 1980s comes crack, the crack epidemic, something they are also using to fund a war that they're not supposed to be involved in Central America. But here it comes. Now, for the black male, crack is going to do one or two things. It's either going to restore your relevance because you're going to take it and you're going to hustle, you're going to sell it, you're going to get the things that most women are looking for to determine whether or not you are a man, you got money. And so you're going to get out there and sell it. Or if you're not going to sell it, you're going to use it to escape. So it consumed and destroyed the black community in the 80s. Black men trying to sell, getting locked up, killing one another, getting killed by police, doing major time taken away from the families they created when they got that money, left them with nothing because that wasn't legitimate. So they took it, left their families to figure it out. Many times she followed in his footsteps because that's the only thing she knew. So now she's out there slanging. And now she's in this crosshairs. Now the child ends up in foster care with a family member that can't afford to take care of them, and poverty ensues and continues. Then there's the other ones that their whole lives are destroyed. They never recover from what crack did to the community. Then comes the 90s, and that's where we're going to finish them off. We're going to put a crime bill together, and we're going to lock up anybody that especially when it comes to cocaine, but we're going to put an emphasis on crack cocaine. Crack cocaine is going to carry a much more stiffer sentence than powder cocaine, which is a more pure form of the drug. But crack cocaine is predominantly in impoverished neighborhoods. It's a poor person's drug. So it's going, and who are the predominant poor people in the country? At the bottom of the socioeconomic ladder are black people. So we're going to predominantly negatively impact black people. Guarantee you can sit up and tell me, politicians, that you didn't know that was going to be the outcome. But I can tell you, I can look at it and know the research was there to tell you that's exactly what you knew was going to happen. That's why you started building prisons in the 90s. So Texas alone went from 40 prisons at the end of the 80s, 40 total prisons, to almost 200 now. And they started building those in the 90s because they knew it was coming. Now the private prison industrial complex is making a killing off of these outdated laws and the move and the push. And the thing is, well, stop committing crime. Well, criminology 101 and penology 101 tells me that wherever there's poverty, there's crime. Nobody's going to sit there and starve to death. Nobody's going to sit there and say, well, I can't get a job, so my family is going to starve. I can't get a job, so the lights are just going to be off. No, people are going to do whatever they have to do. Well, most people, if they can't get government support, if they can't get whatever they're trying to get, they will. There's three ways. Let me explain this to you so you understand the dynamic. There are three ways that a man is going to be able to provide for his family. Income. Now, income comes in one or two ways. You either get a job or you own a business. If you can't get a job and you can't hold a business together for whatever reason, the income's down, the economy's down or whatever, but you're going to do that. If you can't do that, the next thing is some sort of subsidy, some sort of supplemental or subsidy coming from someone else, somewhere else, or something else, whether it's the government, whether it's some organization, but somebody's got to be giving you something that you're not earning. And if you don't qualify for that, in most instances, we didn't, crime. Those are your income channels, period. You're either earning income, and you got to understand, if you look at it, Who is the most unemployed person? And they'll tell you it's because black men don't want to work. No, that's not it. Black men are turned down. Here's something else. When black men do work, a white man with a high school diploma out earns a black man with a bachelor's degree. These are your realities. So then you have to decide, what are you going to do about it? Again, we're not here to be victims. So we're not talking about it from the vein of sitting up saying, I can't do anything. We're talking about from the vein, if we know that even if we get a degree, we're not going to ever reach a point where we out earn them because the system is set up to reward them at a greater capacity than it rewards us, then what must we do? We must learn to create our own. Why? Because number one is, you're not going to fire yourself. Number one. Number two, the moment that you're able to create something that is able to sustain you, there's a level of confidence of knowing I can do it. And so you're never at a point where you become uh, convinced that you have to have them help you, because they're only going to help you when it benefits them. And it's normally at your expense. So you have to understand that. You also have to understand, when it comes to business, you're not going to have the same access to capital that they have in order to start the business. Another reasons why blacks need to come together in collective and invest in one another. Chocolate milk. You got a good question. I'm going to put that up. She says, I believe that the majority of black women would choose to get married. Are most black men even desiring marriage? That's a good question. There is a group of black men who I think who have checked out. And my goal is to work with as many men as possible to inspire our men to be what we need them to be. And that's starting in a number of different ways. Obviously, I want to work with men who are already in the position of being adults and trying to figure this out. And there's a lot to figure out. And we've been misled. We've been sent down a rabbit hole chasing things that have no intrinsic value. And so there's something that we need to work with our government, but also we've got to look ahead of ourselves. And one of the things that I think we have a problem with is that we don't have enough men who are willing to plant seeds that they may not live long enough to see come to fruition. What do I mean? There are 4-year-olds, 5-year-olds that we want to work with black men lead, to teach them the principles of manhood, to teach them that a man is a protector, a provider, a promoter, a priest, and a prophet in his home, and that he has a responsibility economically, socially, physically, and spiritually to his family, and that he needs to be able to function in that even in the most difficult times. Doesn't mean he's going to be perfect, doesn't mean he's always going to have all the answers, doesn't mean he's going to always hit the ball, but it means that he needs to know what his responsibilities are. So he's always working toward it, so that at the very minimum, there's always an effort that his woman can look at and see and know that he loves her based on the effort. And then she can come in and provide him with what he needs in the way of affirmation, in the way of confirmation, in the way of spiritual support, offering up her spiritual womb to birth his vision, and then so much more. And in turn, he gives her the space of security in which to operate and then manifest her vision. Because this isn't about somebody selling themselves short so the other person can succeed. This is about both people having a passion and coming together with a clear vision that moves both of them forward. And so uh, you have to really and truly understand the dynamic of what's working here and what's working against us. But to answer the question, there are plenty of men that want to be married. The thing is, what's happening to marriage altogether? And so that's the question, is how much do we value marriage? How do we see marriage? You got to understand that in the 70s, something changed. And again, it was about the disintegration of the family. And it was a heavy focus on the black family. And obviously, all families were impacted, but the black family could afford to be impacted the least, and we were impacted the most. Here's what happened. Before the early 1970s, in order to get a divorce, you had to prove that there was a reason for the divorce, that there was abuse, that there was infidelity, that it was consistent, and so much more. And even then, judges would sit up in many instances and say, okay, I'm going to order you to have counseling and come back to me before 6 months, and I'm going to interview your counselor, and I'm going to, based on what they tell me, make a decision on whether or not you can be divorced. Well, in the early 70s, that changed, and it went to a point where all you had to state in your divorce is that it was irreconcilable differences. Well, I can tell you that if you spend every day with someone, every day, every month, every year, ongoing, there are going to be some differences. There are going to be some times you're on a different page. There are going to be some times that you feel misunderstood. There are going to be some times you feel neglected. There's just so much going on. But when you don't have to work it out, when there's nothing compelling you to stay and put in work, it's so easy to walk away because there seems to be so many other options that you don't have to deal with that. And again, this isn't me talking about staying in an abusive relationship, whether it's emotional, psychological, physical, or financial. I'm not telling you to deal with struggle love. I'm not, when I say struggle love, I mean, at some point, there has to be progress. You have to see yourself coming out of something. Uh, I can tell you that even the wealthy people go through periods of struggle financially. What I'm talking about is you can't have an entire life where you never experience anything above struggle and poverty. There's something wrong, and that needs to be worked out. And that again can be worked out while you're in the marriage if the person is willing to do it. But there has to be a willingness to invest in what you have. And uh, one of the biggest problems I see when I see marriage is there are a bunch of jaded people who have been married, and the marriage didn't go the way they thought that it would, and they're jaded now, and they ain't trying to do it again. And all of the little superficials that come with marriage, everybody's doing that now. You can get it all without being married. And so there's nothing to say, hey, I'm going to be committed to anything. And the problem is, if you can't be committed to anything, you're never going to achieve anything, because everything worth achieving requires commitment. And if you can't be committed to the deepest, most intimate covenant, you won't be committed to the grind. You won't be committed to the hardships that it takes to build a company. You won't be committed to the days of uncertainty that comes with building a company, because there aren't going to be a check on the 1st and 15th. You're going to have to go out and get it. And that's scary. So you're going to fold back and take whatever job you can get, but it's not enough to get you through. And so you never get there because you don't understand it. And because you have nobody around you that you trust to teach you, or nobody around you willing to teach you, because everything is competitive. There's so much going wrong, and it starts in the family. So we have to heal the notion and idea of Black love so that we do have more Black men willing to get married. Here's what I can tell you, despite what's being presented in the media, that when a Black man does desire to get married, 88% of us are marrying marrying a Black woman. Now, what I can tell you is that there's a tendency that the more affluent a man is, the more obviously the more options he has, and there's a tendency to choose. What I can tell you is, never at a point in my life, no matter how much money I had in my bank account, and there have been some times I had sweet spots, never in my mind, ever in my life, considered doing anything but loving a Black woman. I will not do it. You know, I love I love my sisters. And so with that being said, what I want to do is, hold on, there's another one. Black Lawrence Lee. No, Danette Mitchell, I'm gonna put you up next. I definitely get this. There's definitely this going on too. What Danette is talking about is this odd relationship between Black mothers and Black sons, where they are pushing their young sons into the roles of manhood and heads of households and leaders and little boyfriends. And again, like she says, not in the way of physical incest, but in the way of a warped sense of relationship and responsibility, because there's no head in the house. There's a natural desire to have one. The problem is the things that a young boy learns that makes him a true leader, a true head, a true king, is learned from a man who is doing it. And the problem is, if that man is in close proximity, he's not seeing it in a high enough frequency for it to be inculcated into the deepest recesses of who he is. He's probably not going to emulate it in the way he needs to emulate it to be that. And so we've got to be careful in what we are doing in presenting this type of behavior, but it is a problem. And my thing is, we have to move back to valuing our relationships with one another at a level that we build strong relationships. And I want to be clear here. It's easy for us to point the finger. As a Black man, I can sit up and say, well, this happened to me and that happened to me. And the bottom line is, what I have learned and what I am learning is that it starts with me. I can easily sit up and say, man, this happened to me when I was this age. This happened to me when I was that age. This happened to me on that number. And then she broke my heart, or she did this. And so now I'm with this person. And now let me tell you something. You've got to be the best version of you. You've got to learn how to be the best version of you. And you've got to be the best version of you no matter what someone else does, because you can't control what someone else does. But what you can control is how you respond to it, what comes out of it, and what you're going to do afterwards. That's what I want people to understand is we don't have the room to be emotionally reactive about everything that's going on with us right now. And there's a lot. Our children are at jeopardy. Our children are being targeted. Our children are being targeted through their devices, through media, through social media, through all these different things. They're struggling with their image. They're struggling with their identity. They're struggling so much. And the reason that's happening is because the homes are not solid. Period. We can make all the excuses. We can blame everybody we want. Our homes aren't solid. Our homes aren't whole. And another thing that happens is we become so consumed with who we are with ourselves that it stops mattering. We have to be aware of the gravity of our responsibility, of whom much is given, much more is required. Whether you are of Christian faith, whether you are from Islam, whether you are from another practice of spiritual, I work with everybody. I don't tell people how to approach the Most High or the divine or the source. I just tell people, if you know there's a source and that source has set you here for a purpose, then you have a responsibility of walking in the fullness of that. And you have a responsibility of understanding how you are going to be at your height. We were not designed to operate singularly alone. We were designed to function as a unit, as a collective, to come together. And we are at odds with one another. We don't see the beauty in one another anymore. We literally are now moving into a place where we are programmed to find the fault in one another before we see the beauty in one another. And we don't see how that is working against us. Yeah, that idea of a 12 or 16-year-old being called the man of the house, first of all, that's a whole lot of pressure without any type of understanding. The very fact that you're calling a 12 or 16-year-old the man of the house says that there's no man in the house. Again, that's a problem. And then well, I don't need a man. You don't need a man to complete me. That's a social construct that's extremely destructive. As an individual, I'm who I am. And as an individual, I don't need anybody to complete me. I'm Rick Wallace. I am who I have become. I bring a great deal to the table in a lot of ways, but I also bring my humanity. I'm not perfect. But what I can tell you is I will never be as strong by myself as I am with a good, strong woman by my side. It simply cannot be. It's designed that way. Same thing for women. You better understand. I don't care how awesome you are. I don't care how much you're putting it down. I don't care how many figures you bring home every year. The right man will enhance and elevate. This is not a magic potion, though. This isn't that person gonna come in, everything's gonna be great. Stop looking at the superficial. Look at the spiritual level. That's what we're being robbed. We're being robbed on the spiritual level because we're looking for what we can see that's shiny. Stop looking for the shiny things. Mom taught me a long time ago, everything that glitters ain't gold. Stop looking for the shiny stuff. Start looking for the stuff that you can build a foundation on. Start looking for the stuff that's going to matter. We have a lot of work to do. I am truly hoping that we get there. I'm truly hoping that we understand that. Let me leave you with a question. If the Black family wasn't important, do you think they would have gone to the lengths they've gone to destroy it? That reverse engineered ideology is something you should examine. Nobody is going to invest what has been invested in destroying the Black family unless the Black family was a threat. It was and still is the Black power base. The problem is they've destroyed 70% of it already. And they're coming for our homes now. And they're pulling Black men out, sending them to prison, divorce, animosity, and vitriol in the home. Because we don't understand how beautiful we are together. We don't understand how much we can build together, how much we can grow. And the thing that I hope and encourage you to do is to love and learn and listen. Love, learn, and listen. Learn to speak the love language of the person you're engaged with. It may be different than anything you've heard before. And if you don't take the time to learn it, you can't understand where they're coming from. It's worth the investment. Learn to give to things other than the things that you desire to have in the relationship. Learn to be what you're needed, but also learn to express what you need. There's a work that has to be done in this. And we live in a society now that doesn't want to put in the work. We live in a society now that just wants it to be. Everything needs to be. That is something that we're going to have to change. On that note, look, I'm going to get ready to get out of here. I really do thank everybody who stopped in, Danette, Chocolate, Ethylene, and everybody else who really contributed and added some value to this conversation. Thank you so much for doing that. But we still have work to do. Again, I'm going to ask you to support the work we're doing because it is invaluable. We're socializing young Black boys and we are helping young girls to heal. We need to make the Black Men Lead Rite of Passage a national network and universalized rite of passage. Why is the universalization of a rite of passage important in the U.S.? Because we need to have a clear definition of what Black manhood is. We need to stop allowing every man to define what manhood is based on his strength. We need to command and demand that we as men rise up and be all that we could be. And so we must search ourselves and be honest with ourselves about where we fall short. As I say, I come with my humanity. And if I come with my humanity, I must understand that in that humanity, there's a need to improve. There's a need to grow. There's a need to be what I am not yet. And I have to be committed to it. And I can't carry an ego that's too easily bruised because then I can't listen to the demands of the people who need me. And so I must grow. I must set it down. I must be able to hear. I must be able to respond. I must be able to love at a level that pulls someone out of a space of distrust, a space of animosity, a space of inherent distrust. So what am I saying? I'm saying that we have work to do. So again, for those of you who really want to be a part of how this works, you have to be invested in doing the work yourself, but in creating an environment for the people who don't even realize they need it yet, but it's out there. This is something that's so important. For those who do want to support the work we're doing, The link is in the description box. For those of you who don't want to use the link in that way, you can always use the organization's Cash App account. That information is in the description box. For those of you who are new to what we do, the organization's official website URL is in the description box. You can learn what we've been doing for years. We're not new to this. We're true to what we believe in. I'm passionate about what I do, and I'll say, I'm still at my age now, I'm still in a growing process. I'm still in the process of becoming, and I'm okay with that. And I'll probably be becoming when I leave this place. But my hope is that I have become something that my family can be proud of. My children and my grandchildren and their children and grandchildren can be proud of. But I want to teach as many other young males to have a principle of entering a life. And I want to keep as many healthy so they don't have to go through the shedding of all of the hurt and the pain that so many of us men had to go through. And the work that we are still having to do and put in. But anyway, on that note, I'm challenging you. Be a part of the solution. Thank you guys for stopping in. Thank you for showing your love and support. And I'm going to get off of here now and get back to work. You guys have an unbelievable day, and we will talk soon.